I always thought swiping right was just a harmless leap of faith, a way to meet someone new and potentially make a real connection. But that fateful Tuesday night shattered any illusions I had about online dating. What began as a simple hope for companionship turned into a waking nightmare that still haunts me. Here's my story, one I share as a confession, a warning to anyone who dares to trust the smooth promises of a well-crafted profile. It started like any other evening on Tinder. I'd been through a rough patch after a messy breakup, and I downloaded the app, hoping to fill the void left behind. That's when I matched with a woman named Claire. Her profile was flawless. A series of candid snapshots taken in soft golden light, a witty bio promising authentic conversation, and a dash of mystery, and an air of confidence that was impossible to ignore. Our chat started innocently enough, peppered with laughs and mutual interests. Classic lines about favorite movies, travel dreams, and our shared taste in dark roast coffee. As the conversation progressed, she suggested meeting for a drink at a cozy, little-known bar downtown. I was hesitant at first, but her warmth and attentiveness gradually broke down my guard. "Your messages feel so genuine," I had typed one evening. "I'm really looking forward to meeting you." Her reply came quickly. "I know, right? There's something about real conversation that can't be replicated online. See you soon, Daniel." I couldn't shake the excitement and the tiny seed of doubt that perhaps this felt too good to be true, but I was too enamored with the prospect to overthink it. We agreed to meet at 8 p.m. outside the entrance of the Lantern Room, a dimly lit bar with eclectic decor and a reputation for privacy. As I stood shivering slightly in the cool night air, my eyes scanned the small crowd for a glimpse of the woman behind the screen. Then I saw her. Claire was leaning casually against the wall, her dark hair softly framing her face, her eyes alight with a friendly smile. She waved, and I felt a surge of relief and anticipation. We exchanged quick greetings and stepped inside together. Over a couple of shared cocktails and plates of savory tapas, the conversation flowed effortlessly. Claire was intelligent, with a dry sense of humor that resonated with me. But as the night deepened, I began noticing little oddities that I couldn't quite put my finger on. She'd frequently glance over her shoulder, her smile tightening momentarily whenever her phone buzzed. At one point, I saw a flash of a message on her screen, a sender's name I didn't recognize, and when our eyes met, she quickly looked away. "Is everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She hesitated. "Yeah, just some work stuff. It can get hectic sometimes." I nodded, attempting to let it go, but the question lingered in my mind long after we left the bar. Our conversation then took an unexpected turn when Claire suggested we continue our evening with a walk along the river. The urban streetlights flickering off the water and the distant hum of the city served as a strangely romantic backdrop. Yet, as we walked side by side, her phone continued to buzz. She became increasingly distracted, her eyes darting nervously toward the darkened alleys we passed. "Are you okay?" I asked again, now truly concerned. Her smile was forced as she replied, "I'm fine, Daniel. It's just, I'm not used to sharing my number with so many people. You know how it is." There was something else too, a sense that she was hiding something, a subtle tension that made every shadow along the riverside seem menacing. I tried to shake off the sensation, attributing it to the chilly air, or maybe my own overactive imagination after months of solitary nights. I dropped her off near her apartment building at around 10:30. We exchanged warm goodbyes, and for a moment, everything seemed perfectly ordinary. As I drove away, I noticed a car following me at a distance. I tried to convince myself it was mere coincidence, a nearby commuter perhaps. But the tailing continued, a persistent echo of that uneasy feeling from earlier in the night. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I decided to search for more information about Claire. Her Tinder profile was pristine, but when I looked her up on social media, I found only fragments. A few likes, some comments on posts by friends. Nothing really out of the ordinary. Yet, a nagging thought persisted. Why had her phone been buzzing so nervously that night? And why did she seem so unsettled? That same evening, while I was scrolling through my messages, an unknown number texted me. "We need to talk. Meet me at the old warehouse on 5th Street at 11 p.m. R." The message sent chills down my spine. Who was R, And why were they reaching out about my recent Tinder date? I wasn't sure what to do. My rational mind warned against engaging with strangers, yet an inexplicable compulsion to find the truth pushed me to comply. At precisely 11 p.m., I drove to the abandoned warehouse, its broken windows and rusted metal beams casting an eerie silhouette against the night sky. I parked a discreet distance away and watched as a solitary figure emerged from the darkness. The person was cloaked in shadows, and as they drew nearer, I could make out the outline of a young man with anxious eyes. "Are you Daniel?" he whispered, almost afraid to speak. "Yes," I replied, trying to steady my voice despite the pounding of my heart. "Who are you?" He hesitated, then replied, "My name is Ryan. I was on a date with someone who looked exactly like you described, but not quite. I know it sounds insane, but I've been receiving messages from the same unknown number. I thought, maybe you could help me figure out what's going on." I felt a mix of relief and dread, realizing that I wasn't the only one feeling something was terribly off. Over the next few minutes, Ryan recounted his own encounter on Tinder. His date, who called herself Claire, had also seemed eager, yet strangely distracted. He'd caught a glimpse of a photograph on her phone that wasn't part of her profile, a blurry image of a man, his face obscured by shadow, watching her from outside a window. Ryan. That image terrified me, Ryan admitted, his voice trembling. It was almost like she was documenting someone, or someone was documenting her. Then she vanished off the radar after that night. Now sharing the same unnerving experience, we began comparing notes. Ryan and I realized that the unsettling details were too similar to be coincidental. There was a pattern, a dark, orchestrated design we couldn't yet grasp. That shared revelation was our first twist. Our seemingly isolated Tinder dates were connected by a common thread, an unknown puppeteer lurking behind the digital facade. We decided to retrace our steps. I recalled that on the night of my date, the incessant buzzing of Claire's phone and her furtive glances hinted at something deeper. Ryan mentioned that after his date, he received a similar text message from an unknown number urging him to meet, though he'd been too terrified to obey. Was it possible that the same person or group was targeting multiple individuals using fabricated Tinder profiles? Determined to get to the bottom of it, we agreed to meet again in a public space to share everything we had gathered, from screenshots of messages to details of our dates. Over coffee at a quiet, 24-hour diner, we exchanged our stories. The pieces were slowly coming together, fabricated profiles, stalking, and an underlying intent to unsettle or even control. The terrifying possibility began to dawn on us. The orchestrator wasn't after romance or connection. They were after something far more insidious, a calculated attempt to isolate and terrorize vulnerable individuals. As Ryan and I delved deeper into our investigation, another shocking twist emerged. While comparing profile pictures and cross-referencing details, we discovered that Claire wasn't even a real person. Her pictures were eerily similar to those found on a popular stock photo website, altered just enough to seem personal. It appeared that someone was using a stolen identity, not only to lure in unsuspecting victims, but also to control the narrative of these dates. I decided to confront the Tinder support team about the suspicious profiles, but their response was vague at best. It left us with more questions than answers. Who was behind the fabricated identity, and why were they using it to orchestrate such elaborate and chilling encounters? One night after another grueling day of piecing together our findings, I received a text that made my blood run cold. "Stop digging, or you'll be next. R." This R was the same signature from the mysterious texts, and it was meant as a warning. It hit me that whoever was behind all of this wasn't content with just unsettling us. They were in control, watching every move, and ready to silence anyone who came too close to the truth. The next few days were a whirlwind of paranoia and fear. Ryan and I began to fear for our safety. I started receiving calls late at night, each one filled only with ominous static. My phone's caller ID revealed repeated untraceable numbers. Every shadow outside my apartment, every unfamiliar car parked on the street, felt like a harbinger of impending danger. I took precautions. I changed my routines, installed extra locks, and even considered staying with a friend. But nothing could erase the constant gnawing fear that I had been marked, that somewhere, someone was always watching. I began to wonder if this was all about control, about making sure we remained frightened, compliant, and isolated. One particularly harrowing evening, as I walked home from a late shift at work, I felt a sharp pressure on my shoulder. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat, but saw nothing but the indifferent glare of street lamps and the quiet hum of distant traffic. In that split second, I realized that every step I took was monitored, every movement a potential invitation to disaster. Eventually, I managed to gather enough evidence to report the matter to the authorities. Ryan, too, filed a report. But as is often the case with cases that straddle the line between cybercrime and personal threat, the investigation dragged on with little visible progress. The police could only do so much when it came to digital subterfuge and untraceable warnings. The chilling truth is that I still don't know who orchestrated those dates or what their ultimate goal was. Was it a cult of psychological manipulation, a sick individual using technology to prey on vulnerable hearts, or even a twisted experiment in control? The lack of clear answers is perhaps the most terrifying part. I live now with an enduring sense of vulnerability. Every new Tinder match sends a shiver down my spine, a stark reminder that even in the world of digital connections, trust can be an illusion. I don't regret swiping right that day because it taught me that beneath the veneer of modern romance can lurk a darkness far more real than any ghost story ever imagined. To anyone reading this, take heed. Online platforms, no matter how well they promise connection, can also be the stage for real-life horror. The next time you're about to send that swipe, remember my story. Look for the subtle signs, trust your gut, and know that sometimes the face smiling at you on a screen may hide a truth too terrible to bear. In the aftermath of that fateful night, I continue to rebuild my sense of normalcy, albeit with an ever-vigilant eye on the shadows. The online world is vast, unpredictable, and sometimes just a little too dangerous for comfort. Stay safe, stay aware, and above all, trust no one with your heart in the dark. I never imagined that a simple swipe on a dating app could plunge me into a waking nightmare. But that night, the night I met Tyler, redefined everything I thought I knew about trust, attraction, and the darkness that sometimes lies hidden behind a charming smile. It began on a rainy Thursday evening. I'd been feeling lonely after a recent breakup and turned to Tinder, desperate for distraction and perhaps a spark of hope. That's when I saw his profile. Tyler. His photos were everything a cautious romantic like me could ever wish for. Smiling and candid snapshots, surrounded by vibrant cityscapes, his eyes warm and inviting. His bio was witty and self-assured, adventurous, curious, and always looking for the next thrill. There was something intriguing about him, something that beckoned me to take a chance. Our initial conversation flowed effortlessly. Tyler's texts were playful and sincere. We bantered over favorite movies, debated which city had the best late-night diners, and traded stories from our childhoods. I admired how articulate he was, how his words managed to make even mundane topics sparkle with possibility. After a few days of exchanging messages, he suggested we meet for a drink at a trendy rooftop bar downtown. Despite a lingering caution, I agreed, buoyed by the promise of a connection that felt too rare to ignore. The rooftop bar was alive with energy, a mix of laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of urban life against a star-lit sky. When I arrived, I scanned the crowd until I spotted Tyler, leaning casually against the railing, his smile as disarming in person as it had been online. We greeted each other warmly, the initial awkwardness quickly dissolving into easy conversation. Over cocktails, our conversation deepened. I discovered that Tyler was a graphic designer working freelance, which explained his eclectic tastes and penchant for quirky art. He listened intently as I spoke about my own passion for writing. With every shared laugh and lingering glance, I felt the beginnings of something profound. Yet, amid the flutter of excitement, a small, unsettling thought nagged at the back of my mind, an intuition that not everything was quite as it seemed. Perhaps it was just the residual heartbreak making me extra vigilant. Or maybe it was the tremor in his eyes when he mentioned that his adventure sometimes took him to unusual places. I dismissed it, for the moment, I was enchanted. Our date dragged into the early hours of the morning. Tyler offered to drive me home, a generous, gentlemanly gesture I wasn't ready to refuse despite my rising uncertainty. The drive was mostly quiet, the city lights flickering past as he navigated the slick streets. I found myself gazing out the window, the earlier euphoria slowly melting into a heavy cocktail of excitement and apprehension. At my apartment building, he pulled up with a carelessness that unsettled me. As I fumbled with my keys at the door, he asked, "Do you want me to wait until you're inside?" It was a simple question, but something in his tone made my skin crawl. I mustered a nervous smile and shook my head, eager to retreat into the safety of the familiar. "No, it's fine. I'll see you around," I replied, stepping into the building's dim hallway. As soon as the door closed behind me, I exhaled a shaky breath and leaned against it, trying to convince myself that my alarm was unwarranted. But that night, as I lay in bed, a montage of small details haunted me. His insistence on being right there, with me. The way his eyes lingered a bit too long on my belongings as I gathered my things. The momentary flicker of something dark in his gaze when our conversation turned to secrets from his past. I told myself it was just nerves, remnants of past heartbreak, but a tiny voice in my head warned me otherwise. Despite my unease, I found myself drawn back to Tyler. Our texts over the next few days were a mix of playful banter and earnest compliments. He admitted he felt an inexplicable connection to me. I, too, wanted to believe that fate had brought us together. Soon enough, we planned a second date. A quiet dinner at a secluded restaurant, known more for its ambiance than its culinary feats. The restaurant was tucked away on a side street, its entrance marked by a faded sign and an aura of mystery. Inside, dim lighting and soft music created an intimate atmosphere. Tyler arrived promptly, dressed in a fitted blazer that made him look both sophisticated and approachable. We sat in a shadowed booth away from the main dining area, our conversation punctuated by the clink of cutlery and the low murmur of other patrons. As the meal progressed, I noticed that Tyler was unusually guarded about certain questions. When I casually asked about his weekend plans or family ties, his smile wavered, and he'd respond with vague generalities. It wasn't alarming enough to stop our conversation altogether, but it planted seeds of doubt. Then, in the middle of a gentle lull between courses, he mentioned in passing that he'd recently inherited an old house in the suburbs from a relative he scarcely knew. His tone was matter-of-fact, yet there was an odd pride in the way he spoke about it, an inheritance that seemed to come with secrets, though he offered no further details. After dinner, he suggested we take a short drive to see the city skyline from a nearby overlook, a gesture that, under normal circumstances, would have felt wonderfully romantic. But that night, under the weight of my growing suspicions, it felt increasingly sinister. As we drove along an empty stretch of road, he began to pick up on my silence. "Is everything all right?" he asked, glancing over. "You've been quiet." I hesitated, considering whether to voice my concerns. "I'm just, tired," I replied, forcing a laugh. In truth, I felt like I was teetering on the edge of something dangerous, unable to pinpoint it. Tyler's eyes, reflecting the passing streetlights, held a momentary glint that I couldn't decipher, a mix of apology, menace, or perhaps both. A week later, after several more dates that ended with increasingly conflicting signals, I agreed to meet Tyler at his new place, the old house he'd mentioned. He told me it was renovated and warm, the perfect getaway from the hustle of the city. My excitement battled with trepidation as I drove to the suburban address he texted me. The house, set back from a quiet, tree-lined street, had an unsettling quality. a mixture of charm and decrepitude. Its large windows and ornate woodwork beckoned, yet an oppressive silence hung in the air. Tyler greeted me at the door with his familiar, disarming smile. "I'm glad you could come," he said softly. The interior of the house was dimly lit, but tastefully decorated. As we settled into the living room with a couple of glasses of wine, the ambiance felt too controlled. Every detail seemed meticulously arranged to evoke a sense of comfort, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was being led into a trap. After a while, the conversation took a dark turn. He began to reminisce about the house's past owners, mentioning in cryptic tones about a family that had once lived there and the tragic secrets they held. His words, though casual, sent a cold shiver down my spine. I tried to laugh it off, attributing the unease to the wine or the overactive imagination that had plagued me since our first meeting. But deep inside, I was terrified. I excused myself to use the restroom. As I walked through a narrow corridor lined with old portraits, a sharp creak echoed behind me. I paused, my heart pounding, and turned to see nothing but the dark, empty hall. Shaking off the momentary fear, I continued until I reached the bathroom door. Inside, I locked the door behind me and splashed cold water on my face, attempting to steady my nerves. When I returned to the living room, I found Tyler sitting in an unusual silence. His warm smile was replaced by a thin, strained line that barely concealed worry. "Everything okay?" I asked, though I knew I couldn't hide the tremor in my voice. He hesitated, then replied, "I need to show you something in the basement." His tone was low, almost urgent. My heart skipped a beat. Basements were often the stuff of nightmares in old houses, but I tried to reassure myself it was nothing more than a quirky feature of his home. Reluctantly, I followed him down a narrow staircase into a cold, musty basement. The space was lined with boxes, old furniture, and what looked like decades-old memorabilia. Tyler's flashlight beam danced over relics of a bygone era. After a few steps, we stopped in front of a heavy wooden door. "There's something here I haven't told anyone about," he said softly. I felt a chill crawl up my spine. He produced an old leather-bound journal from beneath a pile of dusty boxes. Flipping it open, he began reading aloud in a hushed tone, a passage detailing dark family secrets, crimes buried in the past, and unsettling events that had plagued the house. The words, though archaic, felt disturbingly familiar. I could see that Tyler's hands were trembling as he read. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with a raw mix of anguish and fear. "Why are you showing me this?" I demanded, the wine suddenly tasting bitter on my tongue. Tyler's reply was almost a whisper. "Because they're coming." Before I could respond, a loud crash echoed from somewhere deeper in the basement. The room seemed to grow colder, the air heavier. Panic surged through me, and I realized that something was very, very wrong. Tyler scrambled to close the old journal as I edged toward the stairs. "We need to leave. Now," he urged, his voice a mix of terror and determination. We rushed up the stairs in a chaotic blur. I pushed open the front door without a second thought, only to be met by the cold night air and a sight that froze me in my tracks. A figure standing at the end of the driveway, partially illuminated by the flickering porch light. The stranger was tall, with a hardened expression and eyes that burned with a silent menace. For a long, suspended moment, neither Tyler nor I uttered a word, our minds racing with possibilities. I fumbled for my phone, my hands slick with sweat. "Call the police!" I shouted, but Tyler grabbed my arm and pulled me into the shadows behind a cluster of bushes. The stranger took a step forward, his presence filled with a dangerous calm that sent a visceral shiver down my spine. We crouched in the darkness, hearts pounding in unison, as the figure slowly scanned the property. I couldn't determine if he was looking for us or if he was waiting for something or someone. Every second felt like an eternity until the stranger finally turned and walked back toward the house, his heavy steps fading into the night. Tyler whispered, I think he works for my family. There's something else going on, something I've been trying to hide. I stared at him, my mind racing to piece together the fragments of truth that now threatened to shatter any remaining illusion of safety. The drive away from that dreadful house was a blur of adrenaline and unanswered questions. We didn't speak the entire journey, each of us lost in our own terror of what the night might bring next. I pulled over at a gas station on the outskirts of town and waited for the first glimmer of dawn, my hands still trembling as I tried to gather the shattered pieces of my resolve. In the days that followed, I oscillated between relief at having escaped that nightmare and gnawing dread about what might come next. Tyler and I briefly reconnected over frenzied phone calls, sharing fragments of our terror and trying to make sense of the inexplicable events. He confessed that his family had a notorious reputation, entangled in old grudges, secret societies, and criminal endeavors that dated back generations. Apparently, his inheritance wasn't just a house, it was a legacy of violence and power struggles, one that he had desperately hoped to escape. I sought the police's help, but my frantic reports about strange figures lurking cryptic journals and family conspiracies were met with bureaucratic indifference and the cold certainty that I was now dealing with more than just an ill-fated Tinder date. Even when the surveillance footage from that fateful night was submitted, the images were too grainy to conclusively identify the stranger. The experience left me reeling. I couldn't bring myself to use Tinder again, and every dark, rainy night now stirred memories of that horror, the basement revelations, the menacing stranger, and the lingering question of what or who Tyler had truly tried to hide. There were no neat answers, only a maze of half-truths and dangerous secrets that I might never fully understand. Sometimes I wonder if that night was just an encounter with a twisted family feud or the work of a deranged criminal network. Other times, I fear it was all part of a larger, more sinister plan to lure vulnerable souls into a trap they could never escape. I lie awake at night, replaying every detail, the sound of the rain against the car window, Tyler's whispered warnings in the basement, the cold, dead gaze of that stranger in the driveway. The terror of that night has imprinted itself on my very soul, a reminder that sometimes the facade of charm can hide a darkness far more real than any horror movie could ever depict. I've tried to put the whole experience behind me, but there are moments when a random text notification or an unexpected phone call sends my heart into a frantic leap of terror. The scars remain, subtle and invisible, yet undeniable in their impact. I still don't fully understand why I was targeted or what Tyler's involvement was beyond the immediate chaos of that date. All I know is that the world of online dating is fraught with unseen dangers, and sometimes a swipe right can lead you straight into the jaws of a nightmare. If you ever find yourself tempted by a perfect Tinder profile, remember my story. Behind every curated picture and witty bio might lie a hidden truth, a secret too dark to imagine until it's too late. I share my ordeal not as a cautionary tale for a moment's amusement, but as a real confession of the perils that lurk in our pursuit of connection in an increasingly unpredictable world. Trust your instincts, guard your heart, and never forget. Some dates come with a risk more terrifying than loneliness. Even now, as I step out into the light of day, I can't shake the feeling that the darkness might still be watching, lurking just beyond the edge of every smile and every seemingly innocent swipe. And that lingering dread is a reminder that sometimes the true horror isn't in the encounter itself, but in the revelation that the nightmare was real all along. Stay safe out there, and remember, not every face on your screen has honest intentions.